11 o'clock, protests and prayers. Hundreds of Catholics rally against planned satanic black mass at Harvard University. Now, it is a mass that drew outrage from the archdiocese and even condemnation from Harvard itself. Late today, the club that wanted to host this ceremony suddenly withdrew its sponsorship. Jim Armstrong is working the story live in Cambridge for us tonight. Jim?
Jonathan, in the past few minutes, we've learned this black mass might actually be back on again. Originally, it was supposed to be here in the basement of Memorial Hall. It got moved off campus to the Middle East Club. Spoke to management there this afternoon. They say it was going to be there for a while, but they backed out of negotiations for reasons they wouldn't tell me about. So it did look like the mass was canceled for quite a while. But then this picture showed up on the organizing group's Facebook page. It's their own protest with a promise to go ahead and have the black mass anyway tonight as we speak at the Hong Kong restaurant in Harvard Square. Thousands of Catholics in a more than hour-long procession through the streets of Cambridge. On Monday afternoon, this was all planned as an act of protest, a reaction to a so-called black mass sponsored by students at the Harvard Extension School.
I don't think that there's any way to get around the fact that this event has historically been intended to mock Catholics.
The reenactment was set to take place in the basement of Harvard's Memorial Hall and was to be performed by an outside group called the Satanic Temple.
It's pretty clear what this group is about. This group is about hate. And this group is about, denigrating and desecrating the Eucharist, which is the center of the Catholic faith.
But by Monday evening, the group behind the black mass had called it off after massive protest from all corners, including from the university's president herself. The students releasing a statement that reads in part, "We are disappointed by the self-righteousness of those who conspire to silence others simply because they claim offense."
If they think that we didn't get it or that the public didn't get it, they're not getting it. Because quite honestly, this was just a horrible, horrible, thoughtless event.
Again, the story continues to develop as the evening goes on. Word just a few minutes ago, this group, the Satanic Temple, is planning to go ahead with this black mass tonight over at the Hong Kong restaurant in Harvard Square. They say they want to go ahead and do that, quote, to reaffirm their respect for the satanic faith. We're live in Cambridge tonight. Jim Armstrong, WBZ News. Jonathan.
Okay, so then there's that. Eric, all right, thanks.
Okay. Now to Harvard University, where a satanic black mass is happening in just minutes. The controversial event rocking Harvard, the Archdiocese of Boston, and even Catholics around the globe. Now, the event was scheduled to be on campus, but just a few hours ago, the Harvard group moved the black mass off Harvard's campus to an undisclosed location. Harvard student Aurora Griffin joins us. She is the former president of Harvard Catholic Students. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. Happy to be here, Greta.
So now apparently you've got this sort of moving black mass. Do you have any idea where this mass is tonight?
Well, according to the Crimson's latest reports that I'm aware of, the negotiations did fall through from that nightclub in Central Square. So we're hoping that the whole thing just gets canceled. But the worst case scenario would be that they try to get it back on campus.
All right. If you've had any chance to talk to, like, the president of the university or anyone in the hierarchy on campus?
Well, in fact, I submitted a letter to President Drew Faust this morning with the nearly 60,000 names of people who objected to this hateful event. But I have not received a personal response from President Faust. Her public response has been that she's personally dismayed that any cultural group would undertake something so offensive, but I have not heard from her further.
I'm going to talk about it in a second with the viewers. I'm just going to have a little conversation off the record. But I'm curious, how do you reconcile this with the First Amendment?
Sure. Well, Greta, I don't think this is an issue of free speech. We're talking about a private institution which has defined its free speech as being limited by anything that dishonors another person's religion. It says that that is contrary to the balance of rights that the university promotes. And so I think, according to the university's own definition, this is not something that's acceptable.
Well, it's sort of interesting how the university hierarchy, in the name of First Amendment, didn't toss them off campus. They chose to leave themselves. But if you go 9 miles down the road at Brandeis, they threw out their commencement speaker, a woman who was saying antagonistic things to radical Islam. So it's sort of interesting, just 9 miles down the road, and you've got these two important universities with very different views on this.
That's right, Greta. There are a number of inconsistent messages that are being sent by Harvard in this situation. But I think that it's important that we respond to what's actually, happening on our campus.
We have 30 seconds left. Where do you think they're going? Are they like going undercover or underground? I mean, it's sort of interesting because we've been chasing them for the last 90 minutes. We've had reporters up there.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully, hopefully they're going away. That's where they're going. But I guess we'll have to see. I'll see when I get back on campus soon. I'll myself be at the Holy Hour at St. Paul's.
Well, thank you. We'll be watching to see what's going on tonight.
Thanks for having me on, Greta.
At 11, a planned satanic mass at Harvard doesn't quite go as planned. News Center 5's Mary Solande is live in Cambridge right now with the reason behind that sudden change. Mary?
Yeah, Ed, it was supposed to take place here on campus at Memorial Hall, but the public outcry led to a last-minute change of venue, and in the end, the controversial event fell apart. They came by the hundreds, singing and praying in protest over a satanic black mass that Catholics say mocks everything they believe sacred. When word came that the black mass had been canceled, opponents lifted their voice in gratitude.
I'm very pleased that my religion is not going to be desecrated or my gender objectified or my university embarrassed.
Aurora Griffin had collected over 60,000 signatures opposing the black mass on campus. Boston's Cardinal Sean O'Malley among those vocal in his condemnation.
It's very repugnant and it's just very disappointing and disturbing.
The Harvard Extension Group organizing the black mass reenactment insisted it was meant to be educational, to provoke discussion. But even Harvard President Drew Faust, who attended the prayer protest tonight, called the reenactment abhorrent. Faust stopped short of blocking the reenactment, but just hours before the black mass was set to take place at Memorial Hall, the Cultural Studies Club moved it off campus. A local nightclub briefly considered hosting it, then pulled out. The Satanic Temple members who had traveled from New York left wandering in Harvard Square looking for a venue.
To have a very productive conversation and be able to shed light on the history of the Black Mass. It's just very disappointing.
And it turns out the Satanic Temple did find a venue late this evening, another private club, but by that time the Cultural Extension Club had already withdrawn its sponsorship. Live at Harvard University tonight, I'm Mary Solande, WCVB News Center 5.
Well, let's bring you up to speed here. Late this afternoon, we learned that the Harvard University Club that was going to be hosting this Black Mass here at Memorial Hall on the campus had decided to move it off campus because they felt that it wasn't appropriate, that it was being misinterpreted by people. So they tried to move it off campus. Negotiations broke down with the nightclub they were planning to hold it at, so they eventually decided to cancel the event, saying that the New York-based Satanic Temple that was going to be help them hold this reenactment would hold their own in an undisclosed location. Instead of a black mass on Harvard University's campus Monday night, there were several prayerful protests of the now canceled on-campus Satanic Temple reenactment.
How long to cancel it? I mean, come on. Like, only now when we're walking they cancel it. It's ridiculous.
I think that, they're getting the message maybe that the world doesn't want this.
I know the Cardinals pleased that with these latest developments, but, it doesn't diminish the fact that they are intent on desecrating the Eucharist.
Hundreds took part in a Eucharistic procession from MIT's chapel to St. Paul Parish. Holy Mary, Mother of God. And dozens took part in a rosary recitation at Harvard's Memorial Hall, where the Harvard Extension School's Cultural Studies Club had planned to hold the Black Mass.
We're all for freedom of expression, but something as provocative and as ugly and as mean-spirited as this, really there's no place for it. This is un-American,
There's no intrinsic educational value to a black mass. It's contrary to the assertions of the organizers. It's not a cultural event. It's a hate fest.
Supporters like Kennedy School professor Christopher Robichaux saw the reenactment instead as an opportunity for provocative discussion.
I think that things like this force us to think about what religious liberty means to us, and toleration and free speech.
But Harvard senior Aurora Griffin felt vindicated that her efforts to present the university president with more than 60,000 signatures petitioning the Black Mass had been successful.
I am very pleased that my religion is not going to be desecrated or my gender objectified or my university embarrassed by these actions.
Now, while those prayerful protests were going on here on the campus, there were some people who showed up expecting to attend that Black Mass. They didn't get the message that it had been canceled, and they kind of exchanged words with the people who were here praying. Police were called in. We do not believe there were any arrests, though. Latoya?
Alicia Palumbo, live for us near the Harvard campus. Thanks so much.
Breaking news on a fight over faith tonight. After weeks of complaints, the organizers of a satanic black mass that was going to be held at the prestigious Harvard University tonight, announcing that they are moving their event off campus. Then they said they were no longer holding it at all. And now we're hearing another group may hold it instead. Tony Perkins is the president of the Family Research Council, and Bernard Whitman is a Democratic pollster and president and CEO of Whitman Insight Strategies. We want to talk about this as well as this football player incident that's getting all this attention tonight. Let me start with the satanic mass, Bernard, that's now apparently been canceled because there has been so much pressure on this group that wanted to mock Christianity, mock the Eucharist, and thought it would be really fun to have some sort of devil-worshipping event on campus.
You know, this is the right outcome. I'm glad that they decided not to have it. But I have to say, I agree with both Drew Faust, who's the president of Harvard, and Luther Ziegler, who's the president of Harvard's chaplains. I mean, Drew Faust said, you know what, this is abhorrent, it shouldn't be held, but the principle of free expression is absolutely sacrosanct. It underpins not only Harvard, but our entire democracy, freedom of expression. But Ziegler, the president of the Harvard chaplain, said something I think even more powerful. He said the best way to overcome hatred is to overwhelm it. And I think rather than be overly concerned about a very small minority who have abhorrent views, rather he's doing what we all should do when faced with these situations and showing how love and acceptance can trump that. And as I understand it, the Catholic Church is holding, the Catholic Church is holding two separate events to demonstrate the belief that Catholics have in Christ.
I get it. But love and acceptance of all people is good, Tony. But the problem is there a double standard? Because if some group wants to hold an event on Harvard's campus denigrating the Prophet Muhammad, what do you think is likely to happen there?
Well, 3/4 of Americans self-identify as Christian, and the communion, the Eucharist, is important to both Catholic and Protestants. I agree with with Bernard. I'm glad this came out the way it did, but I do think there is a double standard in that it's okay to mock Christianity. We're demanding more and more from society. Society is demanding that Christians be tolerant of those who express views that are contrary to Christianity and outright hostile toward Christianity. But increasingly, there's little sensitivity given to those things that are held dear to Christians.
And speaking of which, so there's been this controversy to...
But oppressive pieces of You come out here, you got nothing better to do. There's no you too.
Reparation! Reparation! Reparation!
Reparation for the Satanic Black Mass here at Harvard University. He ascended into heaven and seated at the right hand of God, the Father Almighty. From thence he shall come to judge the living and the dead. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Down with sacrilege! Down with sacrilege! Down with sacrilege! Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Ave Maria. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Oppressive pieces of You come out here, you got nothing better to do in life. There's no you too. You retards. You're supposed to be tolerant. It teaches you to turn the other cheek. You retards are sitting here like you're the king of earth.
You tolerance.
We do. We don't come to your church and tell you not to have a You not even tolerate it for 2 seconds to let it happen. Drive in. You have to come and break it up. You have to come and stamp your foot down. Just because I came here to participate in something that I was going to enjoy.
It's one of the strangest stories to royal Boston in recent memory. A satanic black mass was scheduled yesterday on Harvard's campus, but drew protests from Boston's Catholic community and ended up taking place in a Chinese restaurant. As weird as it sounds, the episode raises big questions about the balance between academic freedom and religious beliefs. WGBH News reporter Adam Riley has more.
Harvard University was supposed to be the site of a black mass yesterday, a centuries-old mockery of the Catholic rite of communion. While Harvard President Drew Faust condemned the event, she said student organizers had a right to hold it. But ultimately, plans to conduct a black mass on campus fell through, an outcome cheered by senior Aurora Griffin.
I am very pleased that my religion is not going to be desecrated.
Instead, Harvard was the scene of a so-called holy hour organized by the Boston Archdiocese, whose spokesman Terrence Donnellan tells WGBH, under no circumstances were we going to stay silent on this. It's an attack on the Eucharist, which is an attack on the Catholic Church, which is offensive to 1 billion Catholics. Still, the Black Mass did occur last night at the famously gritty Hong Kong restaurant, featuring, according to the Harvard Crimson, 4 individuals in hoods, 1 man in a white suit, a cape, and a horn mask, and a woman revealed to be wearing only lingerie. No word on whether they shared a scorpion bowl after.
Here to talk more about the Black Mass and the motivations behind it is Lucian Greaves, a local member of the group that performed the Black Mass. So, Lucian, just for people who are uninitiated, really don't know anything about this, what actually takes place at a Black Mass?
A Black Mass is a reenactment based on certain mythologies called from the old witch hunts and in literature. The Black Mass's origins have always come from conspiracy theorist fears of satanic cults that never actually existed, but it's something that some people embrace now as a rejection of supernaturalism, as a declaration of personal independence. It's not meant to incite demons or raise the devil. It's just an act of personal liberation.
Is it intended to be a mockery of the Eucharist, and does it bother you that people are offended by it?
Well, we were cognizant of the fact that people would be offended, and for that reason we were clear that this is a reenactment. So I actually didn't expect this kind of outrage. You have a film like Haxan from 1922 where they enact a Black Mass, and my feeling was, what would actually be the difference if we said we were doing a live performance of the film Haxan? Would it be anywhere near as offensive to people, and should you have to play those little semantic games? But we were also clear that we weren't using a consecrated host, and if anybody had reached out to us, which nobody did, we would have been able to explain that though this does have its roots in this kind of Catholic imagery, it's taken on a life of its own, and it means something completely different now to those who would engage in it.
What means something different?
The Black Mass ceremony.
I see. All right, why don't I bring a couple other voices into this? Ray Flynn is the former mayor of Boston, of course, and U.S. ambassador to the Vatican under President Clinton. And Wendy Kaminer is a lawyer and free speech advocate. First, Ray Flynn, you were at the protest last night after the Black Mass moved off campus. What was it that you found so offensive about it?
Well, I was at the church, St. Paul's Church, that Mass organized by Father Michael Dre. I found the comments from the young students at Harvard, MIT, Catholic students, quite amazing. There were 1,500 kids there, 1,500 students, and they really found this very, very offensive, as I did, because it was a negative depiction of who we are as Catholics. There's so much more that you could tell about a group of people and about a faith without resorting to this kind of, it's almost in the gutter as to what we believe in. And we wouldn't do that to other people's faith, other people's race or religion. And we just found it very offensive. And that's the reason why I thought the story last night was bigger than what the story we thought it was. The story was that people got involved. There wasn't one politician there. There wasn't very much media there, but there were a lot of young students, and they expressed their point of view. They were the story last night. Students speak out.
All right, I want to bring the kind of academic part into this, too, because President Drew Faust, Wendy, said, look, this group has the right to have their meeting. People have the, and Catholics or whoever has the right to be offended by it, but it was sort of a nowhere position because
it was a nowhere position, and I wish she had taken a stronger position in defense of both religious liberty and academic freedom, which is what the students who wanted their Satanic Mass were trying to exercise. And I am offended by some of the teachings and traditions of the Catholic Church, deeply offended, but I would never presume to try to drive the church off campus, to try to drive the ritual of any religion that offended me off campus, or shut it down anywhere. And I am very, very troubled by this increasingly prevalent notion that people have a right not to be offended, and that when they are offended, it is appropriate and even desirable for them to try to shut down the speech or expressive behavior that's offending them, or drive it out of their community. And I think it's important. I do agree with Ambassador Flynn that this is a larger story, and I think the larger story is the context for this event, which is disinvitations of commencement speakers, which is regular protests by students of offensive remarks by other students. It's incidents like the protests of the partially nude statue at Wellesley College.
All right, so on that point, why not just ignore this, Ray? Why have a protest? If you just ignored it, and frankly, no one would have known about this.
I don't agree with ignoring it, because we also have rights, too, and we have an obligation as Catholics to speak out and defend what we believe in. So let the debate begin, and I was very pleased with the way this was debated and came across yesterday. Look, it wasn't Cardinal O'Malley that changed this around. It wasn't even the president of Harvard University that changed this. It was the young students, and this went viral. This went all across the United States. There were 41,000 people that responded to a petition. For the first time in my lifetime, in a long time anyway, I saw Catholics really getting actively involved. They felt outraged.
I want to bring Lucia back into this, though. Are you pleased with the way this ended up? Because your movement, your organization, in a sense, got more attention and more prominence, more coverage than it ever would have had if there hadn't been the protests. And then you ended up having it at this restaurant, this Chinese restaurant. Were you pleased with the way it ended up?
No, actually, I avoided a lot of press on it, and we frankly didn't need media for this. We have plenty of media on other things.
How big is your organization?
Well, we allow people to sign up for free, so we do have thousands of people, but the level of interactivity varies greatly from person to person.
And how often do you do these black masses?
We don't, and that was part of the presentation, was we were explaining that this has become inextricable from the image of the Satanist, and so therefore it was kind of important. And some people like this kind of thing when they themselves are leaving their superstition or whatever. They get to see that they can embrace blasphemy or whatever else without the earth opening up beneath them or whatever. So, but just the same, the core philosophy we have and the kind of drive toward personal sovereignty and away from arbitrary authority isn't really given to rote mechanical process like ritual. It's kind of quaint and antiquated.
I want to give Wendy the last say here.
Thank you. I would stand up for the right of offended Catholics to argue, to debate, to protest what was going on. What troubles me is that they weren't trying to engage in a debate. They were trying to shut down a ritual they didn't like. They were trying to drive it off campus, and they succeeded in driving it off campus. And that's the problem. And that's a very large problem. It is intolerant, closed-minded. It is the opposite of critical thinking.
What happened with
dangerous to
Condoleezza Rice.
democracy.
It's kind of interesting. If it happens against Catholics, it's all right to offend them. But if it happens against other people, the advocates are willing to come right out and defend them.
That is a distortion
but
of what I just
silent
said.
when it comes to Catholics. I know that that's the culture that we live in America today. That's not. It's politically incorrect.
I have an analogy.
And that's unfair.
I would like to give.
Inconsistent.
That's not what I said.
Last word here.
The idea that the Black Mass is hate speech against Catholics is actually quite offensive to us, because we feel that the origins of the Black Mass was rooted in hate speech from the Catholic Church to justify the purges of heretics and other people they deemed worthy of being burned at the stake, witches or whatever else. And the analogy I had for this, to try to understand why it would be offensive to us, is the use of the N-word within black hip-hop artists or poets, when they embrace the word. And there's two sides of that argument that I respect, where some people say you can use that word and you then diminish its value and change its meaning, and therefore that has a positive outcome. And there's other people who say that using that word, given its cultural, historical context, could never be a positive thing, and you shouldn't do it. I respect both sides of that. Now, if you're talking about the Black Mass, you could say that nothing positive could come of it, because it comes from this idea of mocking the Black Mass or the Eucharist. And you could say it's positive for us because it's this declaration of personal independence. But the idea, if we're using the N-word analogy, it would be that you then have, if it were white racists saying that the N-word was hate speech towards them, because it glorifies...
I think we have your point. All right, this is a complicated discussion. Thank you all for being here.